Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge. And by the way, this is the last Rebel's Edge of the week because Pete and I are going to be traveling along with Jared out to Vegas for RebelCon 2025. Mm-hmm. So strap it in, folks. We're going to get ready for a wild ride again because we've got President Trump talking to Putin and Zelensky. We've got Gaza and whether or not Israel is really going to rain hellfire down on them again. And we've got Jerome Powell and whether or not he is going to rain down hellfire or be nice. Yeah. All of that on today's Rebel's Edge. Bang.
In any case, let me tell you this, John.
I love the T-Rex.
In any case, that is a lot of stuff. I mean, honestly, when you think about, okay, what is going on in the macro sense? You got this. I mean, it's a handful. There ain't no doubt about that.
I think, Pete, we need at least two of those three to be neutral or positive for the market to go up.
Yeah.
Just one of them, probably not enough. Obviously, if there was some sort of peace accord, I don't think any of us are thinking that's going to happen today. But if Putin moved towards the middle a little bit, that's a positive. If Israel decided to hold back on its fire, which, yesterday killed 400 people in Gaza, that'd be good. But we don't know if either of those two are going to be positive enough. And then you've got the wild card himself, Jay Powell.
Yeah.
So it's all interesting. It's what makes trading an interesting game every day, folks.
Every day.
All right, Pete. Let's talk about something other than those three things right now. I'm going to say Turkish lira, huge decline. When a currency moves 5%, folks, that's a big move. And it's affecting like Turkcell, TKC, which is a publicly traded company based on the phone company in Turkey and so forth. President Erdogan is really taking some risks right now against the rest of the world. We'll see how that plays out, Pete.
I was just going to jump on the Fed, but here's why I'm going there, John. And I know we discussed it right there at the top. But I think the reason I think it's important is, you know what? What Jay Powell says is probably just as meaningful as whatever they're going to do. We know what they're going to do, or at least we have 99% of what they're going to do. There's always that 1% out there, but 99% they're going to pause, right? I mean, that's what the numbers are showing us right now. And you've got to get out to May before you start to see a cut. But I can say this. It's damned interesting what he has to say after that, because the numbers that we have seen, PPI, CPI, obviously there's some negatives out there too with consumer spending, blah, blah, blah. But I think that the reality is, what does the Fed think of all of that? Because all of that has come out just in the last week or so, week and a half. And I think it's going to be pretty interesting how they decide to navigate the commentary, at least, of what's going on in that side of the market.
Well, what about on the futures side, Pete?
Yeah.
With, I know you're going to look at VIX perhaps, and maybe it's drifting a little lower today, but gold traded 343 this morning. Mm-hmm. That's April gold, folks, 343, another record high. What do you got, Pete?
Well, how about this, John? And I know you've hit this in the past, but it's worth going right here again. First of all, the VIX, you're right. I mean, down 5%, sitting there just above 20, still kind of clinging to 20, and actually just under 21 right now. So call it between 20, 60, and 21 is about where we find ourselves. And we are sitting in that pause before the Fed, right? I mean, that's where we are right now. I think if you look at volumes, you can see some of that as well. So we're waiting. We're wanting to see what the Fed's going to do. We know what they're going to do, but what are they going to say? So that whole process. But on top of that, how about if I told you nat gas? Nat gas, John, is up 35% year to date. Now, you've talked about it, and others, have not very much. But I think the fact that you've talked about it, by the way, we've got a liquefied natural gas stock that we're going to be talking about a little later, too. But
you bet.
When you look at that, John, I think, 458 was the recent high. Now it's at about 419 for nat gas. pretty amazing. I mean, it's gotten to be a little bit volatile, right? I mean, we focus on so many other things about volatility. I think the volatility of what we're seeing right now in nat gas, the ups and downs, it's pretty amazing, actually.
Well, we've also got Pete. We're coming out of winter, so it's natural that we do ease for nat gas, and then of course we start using it for instant on power in the summer if we get a hot summer or hot in certain parts of the U.S. because it'll heat up that water faster than coal will, as far as an instant on process to turn the turbines. So worth watching for sure. Absolutely. All right, let's dive into Stone, Pete, STNE, because this is like e-commerce and so forth down in Brazil. Well, they reported better than expected Q4 earnings, higher financial services revenue for that part of what they do in e-commerce, and a lot more clients. So pretty much all the way across the board, a bullish report, revenue up almost 8% year over year, sequentially rather, and 11% year over year. An excellent report, Pete.
Yeah, top and bottom, they absolutely blew it out, John. It was pretty great. That's why it's up as much as it is. It's been up as much as 15, 16% to the upside. It's interesting that it was a lot closer to the lows than the highs. I thought that was interesting. The shorts are going to feel a little bit of this squeeze, and I think that's exactly why we're seeing the kind of move we're having. It's a great numbers. The numbers all across the board. They did a fantastic job. You mentioned it. You talked about revenue up more than 7% and year over year up 11%. Those are big numbers. Those are really amazing. And you look at margins, that actually has gotten a little bit better as well. So across the board, volumes, that's a little bit stronger. Stock up at about 11 and a quarter, something like that. I think it's pretty interesting. I almost would have expected, especially with the short interest that they've got, it's about 12%. I would have thought it's even higher than that. I thought they might even squeeze them a little bit more. But that is something that we'll have to keep an eye on, because if the stock starts a little bit more of a rise, John, I think that rise starts to accelerate. And I think that's what both of us are probably looking for.
Also had unusual activity, Pete. Stone, we had March 28th expiring 10 calls. And that was with the stock right there at 10. Well, it traded up through 11 and change today. Those calls went to $1.70 on the high. Granted, not everybody gets to sell the high, but if you paid 80 cents for them, like you see there on your screens, the chances are you came pretty close to a double on that. And 100%, yeah, that's pretty good when you're talking about $800, for instance, for a 10 lot of those, and you turned it into $1,600 or more. All right, let's hit another one, Pete. Let's go over and take a look at what's going on with Signet Jewelers. SIG up really strong, but shares had been cut in half this year. Pete and I always like to put things into context, folks, and you could just cheer this one and go, yeah, look at it, it's killing it. And yet it was killed. I mean, the stock was double the price that it is now, Pete, and traded down significantly. Well, maybe it's making a pretty good comeback. I mean, none of us that are rooting for it would say that's a bad thing, but my gosh, this is something that you would certainly rather see this thing slow and steady to the upside rather than boom, boom, boom to the downside. But maybe it's a sign people are coming back into certain retailers.
Yeah. Early in the year, they slammed this thing, and it got pushed around a little bit, John. It's interesting. They're also raising the dividend by 10%. So that's another thing that's pretty interesting. Everything that they put up, again, was unbelievable, not just satisfactory, but outstanding. When you look at some of these numbers, strong forecast, as you mentioned as well, as far as the sales go. The full year, the strength that they got that as far as the sales, that was ahead of things. So, yeah, across the board. And there's some big shorts in this one as well. You always want to look at the fundamental side of these things and what could cause this thing to go not just 20-some-odd%, but like you said, this is a stock that when you look at the 52-week low and the 52-week high, we're talking about $45 up to $112. We're only sitting right now at about 58 or something close to that. So is there room for this thing to go a lot higher? Hell yeah, there is. I mean, this thing, under the right circumstances and any good news, this thing's got plenty of room to get a little bit more of a squeeze, John. And when I look over at what the shorts are looking at right now, that could get ugly pretty quick for the shorts. But pretty damn nice for the folks that are actually going long or have a long position on.
Well, let's drift over into healthcare, Pete, and let's go HQY, down double digits in the pre-market, kept doubling up on the downside till it was down over 20%, Pete. HealthEquity shares down so hard because they reported mixed results and issued weaker than expected outlook. That is not good. These guys, it's cloud-based platform for healthcare decisions, and apparently people not using it as much as they needed to based on what the outlooks were, Pete.
You know, the revenue was actually up pretty decent year over year, but other numbers that they put up were not so great, John. And that was a big problem, as you're talking about. They also wanted to blame a few things, you know, and people don't necessarily want to hear it. It is true, but it's something that people don't want to hear the excuses. But they had some cyber attacks, John, threats, and they had some fraud. They had a lot of different things going on. Stock got hammered pretty good. It's sitting around 83, so it's kind of almost sitting in the middle of the 52-week lows and highs. But yeah, when you've got a mixed report, you've got some misses here, and the outlook isn't great, you're going to get some pain, and that's exactly what they're getting today. This is not one I would want to chase under any circumstances right now. I think they've got a few issues they've got to get through, and it might take a couple of quarters. So this is one where I'm actually backing off. Some of these other names we're talking about, I like them to the upside, and I like the potential for squeezes, and they put up good numbers. This one, not so much.
Well, then let's go to Venture Global, Pete. VG is the symbol here, folks. Nice, strong move. Basically, Bloomberg reporting that the Trump administration is preparing to give conditional approval to export of liquefied natural gas. Well, Biden had, of course, blocked that. Well, these guys, that's their bailiwick, Pete. That's what they do. They export liquefied natural gas. So if such a proposition comes from the president and gets put into action, that should be really good for VG. And you know what else? People were buying it ahead of this. In fact, when it was a $9 stock, they were buying it, folks. On the 7th, which is just 12 days ago, 7th of March, they were buying the stock at $9. They were buying the April 1250 calls. You guys know Pete and I buy at the money. And then as it rallies, we sell upside. Well, this one's got some upside to sell today, Pete. So I hope everybody stays disciplined.
Yeah, and this is a big deal, John. They were talking about it being one of the biggest projects ever. You're talking about $28 billion for this in terms of what they're going to be doing and exporting and everything else. I mean, the plans are for Louisiana to get back into this whole world. LNG is the big deal. And I think that's something that we're seeing. I'd like to see the stock have a little bit bigger move than it's had already, but that's okay because it might be something worth actually kind of taking a look. And the second we see some options come into this one, John, it's probably going to be a pretty decent sign that somebody might know something about what that project looks like, the time frame, everything else, and that it's committed and the pen and the ink is all dried. So still kind of waiting on that, but this is a heck of a story and obviously something that I think President Trump is pretty excited to get this moving and moving in the right way.
Well, this one, Pete, they were buying, like I said, those April 1250s. Pete and I frequently use the unusual activity as a guide, and they were paying 33 cents for those. Well, good for them. But if you bought the 10s, you're making some pretty good coin. And by the way, I think they traded to like 240 today, Pete.
Yeah.
And they're still trading 220 right now. So not a bad day for anybody who actually followed into VG and was betting on nat gas and so forth. I know you've got some thoughts about NILs for high school players. And so I figured I'd pull up a little, bang, bang, bang video here. And I think you guys will get a kick out of this too. And it's going to open your eyes. That's for sure.
The numbers being thrown around for high school NIL deals are shocking. But how much is real and how much is just hype? The rumors are everywhere. Some say high school athletes are making millions, but what are the real, actual numbers?
What are the
Talk
real
to
numbers?
agents, top recruits, and insiders. Here's what's actually happening. The top high school recruits in the country are making about $1 million a year, sometimes more when they go to college.
$1 million
The best
a
running
year in
backs,
high
wide
school,
receivers,
Pete.
they're more at the $250,000 a year, and even higher if a school is desperate. For offensive linemen, the number is climbing fast.
IMG.
The IMG Academy,
Next
yeah.
hit 7 figures by his junior year, while others in the 2026 class
Seven
locked in
figures by
six-figure deals
high
as a
school
freshman in
junior.
college. Defensive backs, which is an extremely important position in college football, are seeing deals between $200,000 to $800,000 if they're in the top 10
Honestly,
nationally.
I don't
For
get
defensive
it.
linemen, they land closer to
just
$250,000 to $300,000 as a freshman, but top starters can double that in just 1 year. And if you're an edge defender, a
Good
pass
for
rusher,
them, though,
that number
right?
gets even
I mean,
higher. For elite linebackers, they're making $300,000 to $600,000.
Elite linebackers,
but that's at the high end of the market.
You
Some
could have been
linebackers
making up
starting
to
in Power 4 are making closer
$600,000.
to $100,000 a year. But here's the reality: these deals are not for everyone. This is top tier talent money. NIL is changing everything, and these
It's
numbers are
amazing.
just.
He's
the
right
beginning.
about it
The
changing
question is,
everything,
how
too.
high can the number go? What's the craziest NIL number you've heard of? Let me know in the comments.
I don't know one. You know what? I'm so naive. I really didn't know much about the high school version of NIL. I really didn't. I mean, that's just amazing. And I don't understand it, though, John. Do you? I mean, like,
It's got to be a contract, Pete, where if you take the money, you got to go to that college rather.
right.
And to a certain extent, Pete, I remember when Magic Johnson signed that $25 million deal for him to play over the next however many years, and everybody said, "Oh, that's the top." $25 million. Obviously, now players make multiples of that for 1 year, but that was like a 10-year contract or something like that, Pete.
Yep.
But the Lakers were more or less setting a cap, just like they did with Scottie Pippen, not Michael Jordan, but Scottie Pippen. They gave him like $16 million over multiple years, Pete.
Yeah.
Now you've got, if you're able to get this high school kid for $1 million maybe because he's the best O lineman at IMG, OMG, by the way. If indeed he gets that, I got to think that now you're saying, okay, we got him. Yeah, he could go into the portal the next year, but we got him and we already paid him. And maybe by the time he gets to college, that's really a $2 million NIL. Who knows?
It's crazy. That's the world we live in today. And a guy who didn't get a chance to live in that world, who is 41 years old and was pretty sure he was going to be following in Favre's footsteps. We talked about it yesterday, John. But Aaron Rodgers, you know what the story is today here in Minnesota? Because that's where I live right now. A-Rod is out. They have said publicly, apparently, that he's not going to sign. They're no longer into any kind of talks at all. And JJ's their guy. And in all honesty, in all fairness to JJ, by the way, John, he's coming off an injury. So I think what the Vikings were thinking was, we need a veteran quarterback to bring in here that can be sort of that go-between and maybe some sort of somebody that JJ could look up to, right? I mean, something in that category, because maybe he's not healthy enough. I think what they're telling us now is, well, he's probably healthy enough. We're going to get a backup quarterback, but it's not going to be Aaron Rodgers. And for maybe some of the right reasons. We talked about him being 41 years old. Sort of his attitude's not always been great, particularly his last year at Green Bay and probably the 2 years with the Jets. A lot of people didn't really like some of the things that he was doing, saying, throwing towels over his head, sitting by himself on the bench, not talking to people with the Jets. I mean, all of those things, I think, have to be looked at by the GM, have to be looked at by the head coach. Do we want to have this guy there? So the MVP is still looking for a spot, and I'm still going to say the same thing that I've been saying, John. I think he's going to go to Pittsburgh. I think he's going to have to sit down with the head coach and make sure that that's going to work out right for both of them. But they've got all the things that they need, John. So because of that, I think that one makes a lot of sense. So here's what I got for you. So under the circumstances of where we are now, I think Cleveland is going to actually potentially get Rodgers. And here's why. They don't got a quarterback. Cleveland's got nobody right now, right? But they do have 2 great receivers. So, they're bragging that part of it up. And so, they could get an edge rusher. If they signed Aaron Rodgers as quarterback, they've got quarterbacks, I know, but is any of them really healthy enough to play this year? Probably not. Or good enough to play? Probably not if you want to make a run. So all of a sudden now, John, you had a defensive end you just paid a boatload of money to. Well, he's at a certain age where it's only going to be a few years probably. And Abdul Carter's sitting right out there right now, the kid from Penn State. Why not grab him? So I think that's why I put Cleveland as possibility for a landing spot for Aaron. Giants, another spot where he could go, John. Malik Neighbors is a heck of a wide receiver. They got a pretty good coach who's had some failures. His failures might be because the quarterbacks they've been drafting, they've cut. None of those really high picks for the Giants are still there, right? And then lastly, you got Pittsburgh. They've got 2 great receivers. Obviously, you got Pickens and you've got Metcalf. Well, that's not so bad. So if you're Aaron Rodgers and I'm looking at this thing, I'm like, well, Cleveland doesn't sound that bad then, because what they've lacked is a quarterback. He thinks he's a great quarterback still. Why not go there? Because if he is a great quarterback, they got a hell of a defense, and they got a defense that's even better because of the draft. I really like these 3, and it's kind of ironic where all of them are and what they play in, John, in terms of outdoor stadiums, all the rest. Although Cleveland's building a dome, but all the the weather features and everything else, I think it's pretty interesting. And who do you like best for Aaron to land with? Do you like Cleveland, the Giants, or Pittsburgh?
Pittsburgh, no doubt.
Yeah.
And the head coach knows how to handle head cases. He doesn't deal with them. Yeah. So if Aaron sits down there and he tries to dictate something, Pete, he gone.
Yep.
They'll take somebody else. But if he's smart, and you said, they've got 2 great wide receivers.
Yes.
That's got to be tempting as hell for him versus the Giants or Cleveland. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, Cleveland, it's where a lot of players go to, end their careers, because you never hear of them again. Unless they go 12-0, on their way to the playoffs, you're never going to be talking about Cleveland, except about, of course, Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
So I would say Pittsburgh is the best shot for him, Pete. If he went to Pittsburgh and he's in great shape, which I think he will be, and he's in good with the coach, he could have 7 touchdowns in the first 6 games with Metcalf. Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me. And like you pointed out yesterday, Pete, he had 28 touchdowns and only 11 picks?
Yep.
I mean, that's the upper quartile of the NFL. Mm-hmm. So I think that's not lost on Tomlin over with the Pittsburgh Steelers, that's the guy that could deliver the ball to those 2 guys.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next up, we got March Madness, John. A little different than everybody's thinking I'm going. I'm not going to basketball. I'm going March Madness NFL. So we've gotten through the combines. We're getting through free agency. We've got pro days everywhere. As a matter of fact, in my backyard, John, University of Minnesota, they got a pro day going on today. So you've got a lot of kids that are not just Golden Gophers. I'm talking about athletes from nearby that they're bringing up here, and they're going to use our facilities as the combine. I think it's going to be very, very interesting, and I think the madness continues, and we are seeing these free agent markets, and some of the signings, John, have been, some of them shocking, not all of them, but some of them very shocking, and probably a lot of people still shocked about the fact that Aaron Rodgers is still floating around out there. I mean, so that gives you a little bit of idea of why I called it March Madness. But I got some dark horses for you, John, and we can decide what we think of it. But I got 4 players that I think go higher in the draft than most everybody else would ever guess, because they've never heard of them, and half of them probably don't know these schools at all. Gray Zabel, North Dakota State. You got Charles Grant, William and Mary, big and lean. Marcus Ware, Montana State, and Jackson Slater from Sacramento State, a stadium where I used to play football when I played for the Surge. So here's the one thing they all have in common. They're all offensive linemen. They're all guys who could play tackle, guard, or center. And all 4 of them, I'll tell you what, I think these guys are worth a lot more than some of these other GMs. So I think that there's a lot of ways where you could really manipulate yourself around in the draft to get some of these players from the FCS schools that a lot of guys just forget about. They they don't do it. I mean, who has some of the best tight ends in all the NFL? South Dakota State. I mean, it's amazing. You want a quarterback? Well, believe it or not, a couple of them have come out of North Dakota State. We've had some Montana State. We had a great quarterback up there this year. I mean, John, to be honest with you, there are players in that level that are easily as good, if not better, than a lot of the other players. And it's because they started out as athletes and they ate themselves in a good way into positions like a big tight end, a guy who might have been a wide receiver, a tight end who's now an offensive lineman. These guys are athletic on top of being big or whatever. So I think there's a lot of guys out there that would be some great dark horses. You got anybody at all that you want to throw out there?
Well, you named several of the North Dakota types, Pete, but I got one from Central Arkansas.
Oh, no.
And I'm not positive, since I already mentioned Pippen. I think Pippen might have played there, Pete, basketball, of course, not football. But there's a guy named Tamarian Wilson, who's a safety from Central Arkansas. The kid's 6'2", 215, and keep in mind, that is a big safety, folks.
Nice big
so in other words, this kid's a hitter. Is he like a Ronnie Lott type? My answer is yes. If you get a chance, pull up some film of him because you probably didn't see him play last year on Saturdays, but the kid is a hitter. And you've got teams like, for instance, the Eagles that need to go restock their defensive backfield. Are you going to replace Cooper? No, but this kid can play. So I'd say, Pete, this kid, good speed, great size, because if you're 6'2", pro measured, means you're pretty much 6'3". And if you're 6'15", means you probably play at 220 something.
Yeah.
That's a linebacker that can run, that is going to light some people up. So watch for this guy, Tamarian Wilson. He might go as high as the third round, Pete. And whoever steals this guy, I think is going to be happy they got him.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, John. And I think that some of the talent levels are exceeding a lot of the big name schools. And these guys developed later, and they probably played less games. They're probably less beat up. A lot of different things that I think make positives out of a lot of these FCS guys. And I think there's a whole slew of them, and there's some of them are going to be running 40s right now over at the University of Minnesota. I promise you that. Kids from South Dakota, North Dakota, Iowa, Wisconsin, whatever, if they're nearby, they're going to be coming there. And your old schools of, you've got St. Thomas. They got great football. They're D1 these days. All they do is win. St. John's University, they put in at least one guy a year into the NFL. It's amazing how many kids are out there that aren't at the University of Minnesota or Michigan or Ohio State or whatever, LSU, name your school. There's a lot of those smaller schools that have some great players.
Absolutely. Well, and we're going to give you a bet too, folks. Pete talked about a player from St. Mary's, and I'm going to say take St. Mary's versus American. They're getting 2.5 points. That's basketball, folks.
Yep.
So check that one out. I think that's a good bet for tonight, Pete.
I like it. I like that one a lot, John. Especially, St. Mary's is one of those schools that the only time of year that you ever think about them really is around this time of year because they play some basketball. They've consistently been a basketball school that everybody doesn't know until March rolls around and they're like, yeah, that St. Mary's is pretty damn good. So I'm with you on that.
Well, thank you for joining us, folks. As we said, top of the show, we will not be here tomorrow because we'll both be traveling along with Jared and Mark Lepresti and Justin Nugent will be coming in from Hawaii.
Yep.
And we've got Ryan Mastro and Wayne Razzie. We've got Liz Clayman coming. It's going to be a great time in Vegas. That's the 22nd, folks, of this Saturday, by the way, of March. And you can also get a virtual ticket too, so check that out. And we will be back with you on Monday for another Rebels Edge, 1 p.m. Eastern.